My name is Serena Michelle Davis. I'm 34 years old, and for the past decade, I've been a trauma nurse at Memorial General. I was still am a believer, a single mother to my beautiful 8-year-old daughter Zoe, and a woman just trying to keep all the pieces of my life from scattering to the wind. But on February 17th, 2023, everything changed. I died. And in the 12 minutes that followed, Jesus Christ showed me things I never imagined I'd see. He revealed truths I'd been running from, and gave me a mission that would cost me more than I ever expected. That Thursday started like any other night shift. The bitter taste of hospital coffee lingering on my tongue, navy blue scrubs fresh from the dryer, and a quick, desperate prayer in my car. Lord, give me strength to make it through tonight. Exhaustion was already pulling at my eyelids, and my shift hadn't even started yet. Before heading into the hospital, I stopped at Ray's Corner Market, one of those 24-hour convenience stores that dot the landscape of every American city. I needed gum to mask the coffee breath and maybe something with electrolytes to keep me going. The young white guy behind the register, Kevin, according to his name tag, was someone I'd seen dozens of times but never really noticed. We'd never exchanged more than the usual, "That'll be $4 and have a good one." But that night was different. As he handed me my change, he looked me directly in the eyes. Something in his expression made me pause. "Be safe out there tonight, Miss Serena," he said softly. It struck me as odd that he knew my name, maybe from my credit card, or maybe I'd mentioned it once and forgotten. I nodded, pocketed my change, and headed out to my car, not knowing those would be the last words spoken to me on this side of life. The hospital was only 3 minutes away. I was turning into the staff parking lot, my mind already running through the night's likely cases, when it happened. A flash of brilliant orange light flooded my vision. The ground beneath my car trembled violently. I heard a deafening crack, and then silence. A construction site next to the hospital had been having issues with a gas line all week. Later, I'd learn it had finally ruptured, causing an explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. A steel support beam came crashing through my windshield. I never had time to scream. I never felt pain. What I felt instead was release, like I'd been wearing a heavy winter coat in summer heat and finally slipped it off. I felt light, clear, aware in a way I'd never experienced before. One moment I was behind the wheel, and the next I was floating about 15 feet above my crumpled car, watching emergency responders, my own colleagues, rushing toward the scene. I recognized Darnell from the ER and Miranda from labor and delivery, both sprinting faster than I'd ever seen them move. Then I saw Lisa, my closest friend at the hospital, drop to her knees beside my body as it was pulled from the wreckage. She was performing CPR, tears streaming down her face, her white skin flushed red with exertion. "Come on, Serena," she screamed between compressions. "Don't you dare leave us!" Lisa and I had had our moments over the years. She'd once confessed after a particularly hard shift that she didn't know how to talk about race, that she was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. It had created a distance between us that neither of us knew how to bridge. But now, watching her fighting for my life, all that seemed so small. She was praying between breaths, her voice carrying above the chaos. "God, if anyone knows you, it's her. Bring her back. And if she can't come back, please meet her where she is." The moment those words left her lips, everything around me shattered like glass. I wasn't pulled upward through clouds or down through darkness. Instead, I was drawn inward, as if the entire universe had folded itself around me. I moved through a space that felt both infinite and intimate, filled with music that had no source and light that cast no shadows. And then I saw him. Jesus didn't appear to me as the stained glass figure from church windows or the pale, delicate man from Sunday school pictures. He first appeared as a black man, with deep, rich brown skin, textured hair, and eyes that contained what looked like swirling galaxies, ancient sorrow and boundless joy coexisting in perfect harmony. But then, as I watched, his features began to shift. His skin lightened, then darkened again. His hair changed texture. His features transformed, sometimes appearing more feminine, sometimes more masculine, aging and then youthful again. Yet somehow, he remained unmistakably himself throughout these transformations. It wasn't disturbing. It was beautiful, like watching the most natural thing in the world. My soul didn't just see him, it recognized him like remembering someone I'd always known but somehow forgotten. "Why do you keep changing?" I asked, my voice sounding different here, resonating not from vocal cords but from the essence of my being. His smile was gentle, patient. "Because every soul sees me in the language of their spirit," he replied. "I appear in ways that make me recognizable so that no one approaches me in fear." He extended his hand now, appearing as a middle-aged man with skin the color of cedar wood, and invited me to walk with him. But we didn't stroll through pearly gates or streets of gold like I'd always imagined heaven to be. Instead, he led me to what felt like a threshold space, a realm that existed between physical life and eternal existence. "This is a place of seeing," Jesus explained, his voice both inside and around me. "Here, souls can understand what the physical mind often cannot comprehend." The first thing he showed me were prayers, actual, visible prayers. They appeared as streams of light in countless colors, pulsing and flowing through what looked like the fabric of reality itself. Some prayers were bright and focused, like laser beams cutting through darkness. Others were diffuse, uncertain, but no less beautiful for their hesitation. "Every sincere prayer is heard," Jesus said, "even the ones whispered by those who aren't sure I exist." Next, I saw people, or rather, their souls. Some still carried the shape and appearance of their earthly bodies, while others had begun to transform into something more essential, more true. But what struck me most were the wounds many of them bore. Not physical injuries, but something deeper, painful gashes and tears in their very essence. "What happened to them?" I asked, my heart aching at the sight. Jesus' expression grew solemn. "These are not wounds of war or disease. These are spiritual injuries caused by division, by racism, by historical trauma, by silence in the face of injustice." He guided me closer to these wounded souls, and I noticed something even more disturbing. The wounds weren't isolated to individual souls. They formed connections between people, like a web of shared pain. "The enemy's greatest weapon," Jesus said, "is not hatred itself, but division. When people see themselves as fundamentally separate from one another, the wounds deepen and spread." Then Jesus did something unexpected. He placed his hands on my shoulders and said, "I'm going to show you something few get to experience. I call it the baptism of empathy." Before I could ask what he meant, I was submerged in feeling, not observing emotions, not analyzing them, but feeling them as if they were my own. I felt the confusion of a white woman I'd once dismissed, as willfully ignorant her genuine desire to connect, battling against her fear of causing harm. I felt the shame of white Christians who remained silent on issues of race, not out of indifference, but out of a paralyzing fear of saying the wrong thing and making matters worse. I felt the ancestral grief of my people, Black Americans, whose pain had been passed down through generations like an unwanted inheritance. I felt the white-hot rage of voices that had been systematically silenced and forgotten. I felt the bone-deep exhaustion of mothers trying to raise children to be both proud and safe in a world that often seemed to demand they choose one or the other. Every pain became my own. Every tear found its channel through my soul. I sobbed not with my physical body, but with the entirety of my being. The weight of it was almost unbearable. Jesus stood beside me, one hand resting lightly on my back. "This," he said softly, "is humanity's emotional DNA. The willingness to feel it, to truly feel it, is the first step toward healing." When the flood of emotion finally subsided enough for me to speak, I looked up at him. "How do we fix this? It's too big, too deep." "One connection at a time," he answered. "But first, you need to see the chains." With a gentle motion of his hand, Jesus revealed something that chilled me more than anything else I'd witnessed. A massive chain stretched across the landscape of human souls, but it wasn't made of metal. Each link pulsed with a dark energy, crafted from fear, pride, guilt, assumption, silence, and resentment. And most disturbing of all, each link carried what seemed to be a name or a phrase. I didn't mean it that way. It's not my fault what happened in the past. You people are always making everything about race. They'll never understand our struggle. I'm tired of explaining the same things over and over. It's easier just not to talk about it. The chain wasn't wrapped around just one group of people. It encircled everyone, tightening around souls of all backgrounds, leaving bruises and restricting movement, creating distance where there should have been embrace. This is not just racism as the world understands it, Jesus explained, his voice heavy with sorrow. This is a spiritual contract, passed from generation to generation, sealed by fear and sustained by silence. It binds both the oppressed and the oppressor, though in very different ways. He turned to face me fully, his eyes now brimming with tears that seemed to contain galaxies. Everyone wants to know if I'm on their side, he said, but I've never taken sides in human divisions. I take the side of love, always love, even when it costs everything. Jesus placed his hand over my heart, and I expected the touch to calm me. Instead, it seemed to align something within me, like a chiropractic adjustment for the soul. Suddenly, I could see beyond the chains to what they were obscuring. I saw churches, hundreds, thousands of them. Black churches with their vibrant worship and resilient faith. White churches with their hymns and traditions. Multiracial congregations attempting to bridge ancient divides. But in so many of them, something essential was missing. Heaven's presence wasn't always absent, but it was often grieved, diminished by the very divisions Jesus had been showing me. Sunday morning, Jesus said, his voice like a whisper that somehow contained the weight of eternity, is still the most segregated hour in America. And then he wept. Not with rage, not with condemnation, but with a sorrow so holy and pure that I felt it changing the very fabric of my soul. They use my name, he said through tears, but often not my nature. They preach love but build fences. They call themselves one body, yet refuse to hold hands across the very divisions I died to heal. I wanted to look away, to shield myself from his grief. But something in me knew that witnessing this divine sorrow was crucial to understanding the mission that was taking shape before me. Just when I thought I couldn't bear anymore, Jesus showed me something different, something that kindled hope in the midst of heaviness. He revealed what he called the hidden ones, stories I had never heard, stories the media never told, stories that challenged the narrative of inevitable division. A white farmer in rural Georgia who stood against his entire community to protect a black family's right to their land. A young biracial girl who became a bridge between her two families, praying every night for healing and understanding. An elderly white woman in Michigan who had been fasting and praying in secret for racial reconciliation for over 40 years, not for recognition or praise, but out of pure love. A black pastor and a white pastor who had switched pulpits every month for a decade, slowly bringing their congregations together despite initial resistance. These are my saints, Jesus said, pride evident in his voice. They are not loud, they are not famous, but they are building bridges in places where bridges seemed impossible. And then I saw something incredible, a structure floating in the spiritual realm. It wasn't made of stone or wood or any material I recognized. It was built from acts of forgiveness offered when it wasn't deserved, conversations that began with trembling honesty, hugs between people who had once viewed each other with suspicion or hatred, meals shared across long-standing divides, silent prayers offered in hospital waiting rooms for people of different skin colors or backgrounds. This structure was alive, growing, breathing. It shimmered with a beauty that made my soul ache. Jesus approached it with reverence, running his hand along one of its walls, which seemed to respond to his touch like a living thing. I call this the sanctuary of reconciliation, he said. It is not built by those who are perfect, or those who have never caused harm. It is built by those who are brave enough to step toward what seems impossible. Every act of humility adds a brick. Every honest conversation, every genuine "I'm sorry" and "I forgive you," these form the mortar that holds it together. I looked at the sanctuary, then back at Jesus, shame washing over me. Lord, I've been part of the problem. I've been so angry, so hurt. I've made assumptions about white people. I've shut people out. I've judged even as I begged not to be judged. He touched my face with infinite tenderness, the way a parent might touch a child who had just confessed to breaking something precious. "You're not condemned, Serena," he said. "You were hurting, and hurt people hurt people. But now you're healing, and healing people heal people." Then Jesus showed me white people, but not as the monolithic oppressors I had sometimes viewed them as in my most bitter moments. He showed me their struggles too, white men and women weighed down with generational guilt they didn't fully understand. People genuinely wanting to help but terrified of getting it wrong. Choosing silence instead of risking offense. People who wanted to be allies but weren't sure if their help would even be welcomed. Fear, Jesus said, is the real enemy, not them. Love isn't about who's right. It's about who's willing to step into the uncomfortable space of growth. He showed me how the enemy, Satan himself, twists natural human fear into hatred, guilt into paralyzing shame, and silence into deepening division. But he also showed me how every act of courage, every step toward reconciliation, every moment of genuine understanding was recorded in heaven's ledgers. Then he turned his attention back to me and my people, black men and women across time, my ancestors who had endured unimaginable hardship, my patients who sometimes looked at me with relief when they saw a black face in a white coat, my friends who oscillated between hope and despair about the possibility of real change. Some were still full of righteous fire. Others had grown weary of explaining what shouldn't need explanation. But so many of them were still choosing love, still extending hands across divides, still believing in the possibility of a better world. "You come from a well of strength," Jesus told me, his eyes holding mine. "But strength without healing eventually becomes a burden too heavy to bear. You were not made to carry all of this alone." He placed both hands on my shoulders. "You are not the wound, Serena. You are the witness, and now the warrior." Then he spoke words that broke me completely, that shattered whatever remaining defenses I had built around my heart. "Race was never my idea," he said. "I created color as beauty, as expression of my infinite creativity. But the enemy twisted diversity, which was meant to be celebrated, into division, which corrodes the human spirit." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "But you, Serena, you have now felt both sides of the wound, the pain of the oppressed and the confusion of those who don't know how to make things right. Now go and become part of the healing. Not with anger, though anger has its place. Not with vengeance, though justice matters deeply to me. But with understanding, with vision. Not to silence others, but to listen, love, and lead." And just like that, I felt myself being pulled back. The beautiful realm with its living sanctuary began to fade. Jesus' face, now appearing as a young Middle Eastern man with kind eyes, was the last thing I saw before pain rushed in like a tidal wave. Suddenly, I was aware of my body again, the crushing weight in my chest, the burning in my lungs, the hands pressing down on my sternum. The hospital room came into sharp focus. Voices, machines beeping, the smell of antiseptic, tears falling onto my face from above. "We've got a pulse," someone shouted. "She's back." I later learned I had been clinically dead for 12 minutes. The medical team had been about to call time of death when my heart suddenly started beating again. That was 6 months ago. The physical recovery has been brutal, multiple surgeries, weeks of rehabilitation, learning to use my left arm again after the nerve damage from the accident. But the spiritual journey that began in those 12 minutes has been even more transformative. I've told this story to anyone who will listen. Church groups, both black and white. Community centers. Living rooms full of neighbors. Sometimes to skeptical strangers who eye me like I've lost my mind. Not to impress anyone or to stir up guilt, but to kindle hope. Because now I know something I never fully understood before. Racism isn't just a political issue. It isn't just history or injustice or systemic problems, though it is all those things too. At its core, racism is a spiritual wound that requires spiritual medicine. And love fierce, truth-telling, bridge-building love is the only remedy strong enough to heal it. I don't look at people the same way anymore. I don't pray the same way. I don't move through this world with the same assumptions. Because Jesus showed me that every genuine attempt at understanding someone different from ourselves echoes in eternity. Every "I'm listening" cracks another link in that ancient chain. Every moment of courage across the divide is recorded in heaven's books. Some days are harder than others. Some conversations still end in frustration and tears. Some people aren't ready to do the work of reconciliation, and I've had to learn that's okay too. Healing happens on its own timeline. It can't be forced. But I keep going because I've seen what's possible. I've seen the sanctuary growing brick by brick, relationship by relationship. I've experienced what it feels like when ancient walls begin to crumble. Lisa, my colleague who fought so hard to bring me back, and I have started a small group at the hospital. Black nurses, white doctors, Hispanic administrative staff, Asian respiratory therapists. We meet twice a month to share meals and stories. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes people say the wrong thing. But we keep showing up because we've all come to understand that comfort isn't the goal. Connection is. My daughter Zoe asks me sometimes if I'm afraid of dying again. I tell her the truth, that death itself no longer scares me, but I have too much work to do here first. She's too young to understand everything I experienced, but she knows her mom came back from somewhere important with a message about love being stronger than hate. So, if you're reading this, if my story has found its way to you, I want to leave you with this. The enemy's plan, Satan's plan, is to keep us divided, suspicious of one another, trapped in our separate corners with our separate wounds. But Jesus' plan is to unite us through love that's brave enough to cross boundaries and strong enough to break chains. White, black, brown, Asian, indigenous. We are not enemies. We were never meant to be enemies. We are instruments in heaven's healing symphony. And our job, our sacred calling, is to keep playing the song of reconciliation even when the world screams otherwise. So listen when it would be easier to dismiss. Speak when it would be safer to stay silent. Forgive when your hurt demands retribution. Pray when problems seem insurmountable. Build bridges where chasms have existed for generations. And above all, love with the fierce determination of someone who has seen beyond the veil and knows that in the end, love is the only thing that will remain. Because I've seen what's on the other side. And I promise you, love wins. It always, eventually, wins.